Everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting of the DeKalb City Council, June 8, 2020. Prior to roll call this evening, I'd like to just let everyone know that we have heard from First Ward Alderman Carolyn Morris, who may be just a tad late. She got tied up in traffic. We have not heard yet from Fourth Ward Alderman Greg Perkins, but I'm sure that we will. Following the Minneapolis murder of George Floyd, this nation, this world, and this community have been torn with raw emotions, frustrations, acts of violence, and a renewed dialogue on racial relations. Tonight, on the eve of Mr. Floyd being laid to rest in Houston tomorrow, kindly rise and join me in a moment of silence in the memory of George Floyd. Thank you. Now, I'm going to ask Ruth Scott, who's filling in tonight for our city clerk, Lynn Fazekas, who called me earlier or emailed me earlier this morning that she was not feeling too well and would not be attending tonight. So, Ruth, thank you once again for being willing to sit in and fill in tonight. So, Ruth, if you'd please call the roll.
Morris. Finucane.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Perkins. McAdams.
Here.
Verbic.
Here.
Favor.
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here.
6 present.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. There's one consideration during the Committee of the Whole, and that is the DeKalb Police Department's annual report for 2019. Are there any additions or deletions to that agenda? If not, I'd entertain a motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Been moved by Alderman Smith, seconded by Alderman Finucane, that we approve tonight's agenda as read. Any comments? Roll call.
Finucane.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
McAdams.
Yes.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
6 yes.
Thank you. That agenda is approved as read. We now move to public participation, and I do have several letters, and then I know we have one individual in the audience tonight who would like to appear and speak to the one item on the agenda. Let the record show that our First Ward Alderman Carolyn Morris has arrived. Carolyn, welcome. Okay, under public participation, the first letter is from Sarah Tobias, 3309 Meadow Trail West, DeKalb. I believe that change truly begins when we start small. While DeKalb is not a tiny town, it is a small town. The more we do in our community to make sure that Black lives are protected and provided equal opportunities for success, the more other communities will notice and also take action. I noticed the agenda for this meeting is the annual report of the police department. I'm pleased to see that there is a community relations team. I hope that team will begin to have conversations with the public about Black lives and the disparity that comes with being Black, so that we are a community, or we as a community can raise up all of our residents. While it is challenging to get together these days, that will change, and it would be wonderful to see the discussions taking place at the library, schools, churches, and at the parks. We need to come together and support our fellow man so that we are all stronger and able to live full lives. The cultural diversity, de-escalation, and procedural justice training sounds like it's one step and is a supportive direction. I recently learned about the 8 Can't Wait organization, and they talk about 8 policies that, when implemented, decrease police violence by 72%. While police violence may not be a big problem in DeKalb, being proactive and implementing any missing policies will ensure that it will remain that way. It will also set an example for other communities. I have provided a link to their website, 8cantwait.org. 8, that's the numeral 8, CANTWAIT.org. Thank you for supporting and caring about all of the residents of DeKalb and opening the door to important conversations. Signed, Sarah Tobias. The next letter comes to us from Shrestha Singh, 351 Rolfe Road in DeKalb. Her letter reads thusly: These are questions from local social worker Shrestha Singh and the pastor Reverend Eric Oji. We have some questions for Acting Police Chief Bob Riddell. Number 1, at a city council meeting months ago, prominent members of the black community implored you to fire the arresting officer who choked Elante McDowell. Given the global resurgence in attention to police violence, why, in our local context, have we not listened to these voices to take appropriate action that would make our community feel more safe? Symbolic gestures like kneeling with protesters are meaningful, but not enough. We want real change and real accountability. Number 2, based on the full 2019 annual report, it seems that the police does a fair share of well-being checks, responding to behavioral health issues, civil disputes, domestic trouble, loud parties, and so-called suspicious activity. This is a vast amount of responsibility. It seems that the police force is working to integrate one social worker onto their team in the coming year, as well as do greater training on behavioral health. Will one social worker be enough? Are there plans to scale this up and invest more resources in community care initiatives rather than using police as first responders for social problems for which social workers and other professionals are better trained? There is a greater trust for people like social workers than there are for police, so why not invest where there are already relationships and trust? How much funding is there for this social worker and behavioral health programs, as well as other community-based programs, compared to the funding for body cameras, technology, and other traditional methods of protecting and serving the community? As is the case with any letters sent to us during this very, very interesting time, what with COVID, all of our council members have received a copy of that correspondence. Police Chief Riddell, I don't know if you have. If you have not, I will be happy to provide you with a copy of that so you have it in writing. Our third speaker is with us tonight, Amy Levine. Amy, if you would come to the podium, please, and address the council.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you for giving me your time tonight. I've been thinking a lot about the police report and the police in this city for the last week. And I've been thinking about a lot of other things. But I was, yes.
Can you pull the microphone close to you?
Oh, okay, is that better?
I think then it'll go on the
I was
TV better.
surprised as a taxpayer at just how high our police budget is. And so I want to make sure that we're getting the best policing we can get. I've also lived in this city for a very long time, and one thing that even those of you who know me probably don't know about me is that I willingly chose, because I felt it was absolutely critically important, to spend 10 years of my life reading nothing but works by African Americans, except for what I, as an English professor, had to teach by other authors. And I did that because I felt Black Lives Matter. This has been key to my life for at least 4 decades. And what I'm concerned about is that we need deep and lasting change. And in the last few days, I have seen multiple texts, articles, all the stuff you've all seen, right? On defunding police. And when I first read this material, I was extraordinarily skeptical. But I have been reading the concrete proposals within these sort of larger category of defund police, and I find that there are a lot of really good ideas in there. And that, for instance, what the last letter suggested, one of the issues is sort of mission creep for police. Many of the duties that police have acquired in the last 100 years, okay, are things that really could be handled, and probably better, by other groups in this society. And therefore, I ask, as we go forward with a new police budget, that we really take seriously, all of us, as citizens of this city, our responsibility to make this the best. And particularly, I ask that we consider what responsibilities really don't belong with the police. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, for those comments. We have no other public participation this evening, so we'll move along to item D, the one consideration for this committee of the whole, and that is consideration of the DeKalb Police Department's annual report for 2019. We have a couple of folks who I know will speak to this item. First of all, our city manager, Bill Nicholas.
Thank you, Mayor. So for those looking in tonight, and those few people in the audience, Amy, thank you, by the way, for coming tonight. The making of the council agenda usually occurs about 2 weeks before every meeting. The city manager gets information from the various departments, in this case, the police department's annual report for the year 2019, and I take the time to read these things and ask questions and then write up summaries, and so that I'm not doing it at the last minute, and so that I can also talk to members of the community. I'd like to get an early start. So it was before Sunday a week ago when we had, or Saturday a week ago when we had our first local protests, that I was wrapped up. I just went through it, I summarized it, and so forth. What a difference a couple weeks make. A couple weeks both in terms of our community experience and what Amy spoke on, and what Sarah Tobias wrote about, how we look at what we need and what we want and what we share, and how that experience might be translated into a more welcoming place where all people feel they can belong. I'm not going to launch into what I think we need to be doing at this point in 2020. Right now, frankly, although the structure is a little still vague, we have a community that is engaging. And we didn't have to set up a public meeting to get people to come out and speak. We've had lots of people speaking their minds, some loudly, some not, some well-informed in terms of experience, some just living and reading about what it's like to be here in DeKalb. And so with all of these various sources, we have a wealth of information to distill, and I think as we're doing that in the days and weeks ahead and months ahead, we'll be the better for it. Before I get into the actual events and some of the data that you wanted me to present to you tonight, and which the police department has worked on, I have to forgive me for, again, falling into this historian talk, but through the last 10 days, I have been struck every day, morning and night, by the fact that here we are, 158 years after Abraham Lincoln said these things. They're as true today as they were then, in 1862. The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves. And then he went on to say, and then we shall save our country. And I might substitute, and then we shall build a true community. And I think that's what our common goal is. Toward that end, there are many people, some dressed in blue, some not, who work for the police department. It's the largest of our departments, both by budget and also by personnel. It performs a range of duties, which one of the commentators touched on. Usually in these meetings, we walk you through a lot of the programs. You've had a chance. This has been posted. I think most people read through it. I do invite you to look at some of the newer programs, which might have seemed revolutionary 2 weeks ago, and now just seem like a small step toward maybe a larger leap that we want to make. I think we made some real big leaps in the last 2 weeks, but in any case, a big part of it is that what's happening now, we've gone just in 2 weeks beyond the idea of having a community engagement team. The whole department was engaged, the whole city was engaged, city organization, the whole city itself has been engaged. We've learned things, not the least of which is what's highlighted in this report off and on, which is that listening is more powerful than speaking sometimes, and engaging doesn't necessarily mean controlling. I congratulate the department as I'm reading this as an outsider, as the chief executive officer of the operational side of things, with how we have tackled some crime in our community. I am alarmed, as I know Acting Chief Bob Riddell is, and Bob is sitting here for those who don't know Bob, who took on the role a week ago tomorrow, right? Welcome to your new role, Bob. And he's done a remarkable job, but among the things that we're looking to do are to, we're right now participating in a body cam pilot study, which call it a study only because right now we would rush to and have everybody wearing a body cam, but it's very expensive. As you know, we've just taken $3 million out of our budget. Even before COVID, we knew we were going to have a challenging fiscal year. We found an opportunity, thanks to the police department administration and Intern Chief Petrogallo and others, found an opportunity to get some grant support and some help from a company that provides these, a couple of them actually. So we've got a little competition going to see what's best. And the biggest part of the body cam challenge from a fiscal standpoint is not so much buying the cameras, doing the training on it, but it's the recording. So if you really want to keep a record of what this endless reel, then you've got even digital storage, which is going to be over time, over years, going to be very considerable. And our estimate right now, on the basis of what we've seen, our local experience, and maybe that'll change up or down, probably up, is that we're looking at about, once it's invested in and disseminated, the body cams and so forth, If everybody had one, it would be about $100,000 a year, every year. It's a body plus. In the police department, a fully trained officer, so with all benefits. So it's something that you will have an opportunity as a council to weigh in on when we bring you the results of the study. The study's going on now, where some of the officers are wearing this hardware, and we're gonna see. So, but I'm happy that we've taken that step. And I think I speak for the department and for our acting chief, Bob Riddell, when I say that's where we want to go. We just have to find a way to get there right now. And we want to do it in a way that everybody will feel that, boy, that was a good investment. That made a difference. There were a number of accomplishments in the last year which you've had a chance to look at. We made, Amy was involved in this, we made some changes in the Safe Streets initiative. Wasn't locked in stone. We wanted to see how it would go, and as we got into our second full year, we noticed that there were issues, and some of the areas that, and 2 or 3 areas that we eventually looked at, and council took some action in. I'm not going to go into great detail here. I just want to, at this point, point your attention to a couple of tables that I excerpted and put in your background for tonight, and it's the data. It's what over time we obviously collect data. We're required to. This is the kind of information that goes into reports that we have to make, that NIU has to make, and the Clery Act requirements and so forth. There are 2 types of charts here. One is the Part 1 crime stats, and those are offenses that are identified from national data banks as violent crimes against persons and property. And in many cases, we see here there are 9, and we're seeing some drops, which is good. We also saw a crime wave in 3 categories: arson, burglary, and theft. And I wanted to say, as I said in the background, we had 2 people that accounted for 120 case reports and 80 criminal charges until they were arrested, which tended to skew the stats, but they're the data. And I'm happy to say that they're not at large and going through the system, but it bedeviled us for a long time. We worked with multiple agencies locally, and we finally got to the bottom of it. Sadly, arson focused in a couple of places, mostly Hunter properties, and we know the big event several events that happened almost a year ago, July, I believe it was, and started a process where other departments got more deeply involved in regulation and prosecution in some of those housing complexes. I'm not at all happy to say that DeKalb is experiencing what many other communities are, not only in this state but around the country, and that's a rise, and in our case, in the last year, a sharp rise in intimidation and sex offenses. It's worrisome. We are very much aware of this trend. We are working with lots of local agencies, family service agents. One of the writers tonight mentioned working with social workers and so forth. Well, we work with a lot of our local social service agencies, and trying both with what might be considered prevention, education, and how people can distance themselves, if they can. Sometimes they can't afford to, from people who are bent on intimidating and preying on a weaker person or a vulnerable person. It's a passion, I would say, up and down the police department to get involved and to try to diminish these numbers, and I'm happy to see that. Bob, at this point, do you have anything you'd like to add?
You know, I think City Manager Nicholas did a good job in explaining the annual report. I'd like to note that 2017, our numbers were a little bit higher than they were in 18, so we had a good drop from 17 to 18, and then an increase from 18 to 19. Our goal is to get back to 2018 numbers or below. COVID, we've started to notice this year with people not working as much that our thefts are back up, but a lot of our violent crime is starting to go down, but we still have work to do, and a lot of those numbers in 2019 were attributed to 2 individuals for the increase, but our goal is still to get our numbers decreased.
I have 2 other things to add, if I may, Mayor, and then stop and let the council ask questions, and hopefully we can answer some of them. I might point out that, as it was reported in the annual report, that the department for the first time is accredited by the accrediting agency that looks at such things as police policies and procedures, and also looks at lots of other records that the department, in the way of its services, will have to report. And that's something to be proud of. It's the first, and it's a step. It involves cleaning up and consolidating, and so there's various policies and so forth. But the question arose last fall, and it was discussed intermittently through the winter. Well, do your policies now say this, or do they say that? What do they condone or not condone? And it, especially in this last week, 10 days, it occurred to Bob and to me and to members of the police command staff, why don't we post these policies so everybody can read them at their leisure, discuss them, engage in that creative process by which people refine their thinking on a variety of issues. And so this week that will happen. I just talked to Bob this morning. I said, is there anything in there that all of us together would say, I don't think you should? And interestingly, I'll tell you what they are. I think you'll all agree. They don't touch at all on what we've been creatively working ourselves through in the last 2 weeks. Example, it's probably not a good idea in terms of the safety of the community to tell people bent on mischief what our procedures are when we get a bank alarm. Probably shouldn't telegraph what we're going to do on the way over and what we're going to do when we arrive, and how we communicate over time, and we do training with banks and so forth. So those procedures are probably best. So that's one. There are only 6 here. Confidential informants, they wouldn't be confidential if we informed who they are, so that's probably not a good thing. Bomb threats and searches. There may be pieces of this, but there's a lot of, most of them that would be redacted if we really wanted to be careful. We don't want to invite people who would be looking for that opportunity to know what our responses are, how we would deal with a real threat, a known threat. Active shooter response, we've had that awful experience in this community, and I happen to be involved in NIU, and the policies which have been changed following the tragedy of 2008 were made public, and I was proud of that. Even then, some of the responses we had to not release just because there are some things that you'll do in those moments that you're trained to do that hopefully we never have to do. But it's not something you telegraph. So this is the array. That will be it. There'll be some type of a reference to that fact, and so there are just a few sections that we'll have to say are probably redacted or omitted, and that's what they are. So I wanted you to know that. And there's another thing. Last fall, after the McDowell arrest, we had an occasion. There was a a protest rally and march at the police station, and at that time, some demands were presented to then interim chief Petrogallo, and one of them was for the city and the police department to become a signatory to a shared principal agreement, which was, interestingly, it was developed with the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police and the Illinois NAACP State Conference, which is the umbrella group for the venerable group. And the initiative began in 2014 after the experience in Ferguson, and the two groups kind of felt their way toward an initial conversation, and what can we do to be more revealing, and what can we do to learn from each other, and so this doesn't happen again. It took a while. In 2018, there was an announcement that this agreement had been struck in Springfield, Illinois, at the old state capitol, and here's that guy again, at the site of Abraham Lincoln's House Divided speech in 1858. Sorry. And the two associations came up then with shared principles. Since then, a number of Illinois communities have become signatory. We are not. I intend to bring this to the council on the agenda on the 22nd, so you and the whole community can see just what those principles are. I think they speak to what we're trying to work our way toward now, and what we've been talking about tonight. So talked with Bob about this, and he talked to command staff. We're absolutely in agreement on this, so you'll have a chance to talk about it then.
Can I interrupt you for a
Yes.
second? With the interim chief Petrogallo, we did endorse
Yes.
those principles and signed on with the Illinois Association Chief of Police. We just have not brought that to council.
Thank you, Bob. That's all I have.
Thank you, City Manager Nicholas and Acting Police Chief Bob Riddell. Thank you. And I'm going to now turn it over to any questions or comments that any city council members may have. Questions of either one of you, or comments based on what they've heard and what they've seen in this report. So with that, I will open the floor to any comments or questions. Alderman Morris.
I was really glad to see one of our public comments brought attention to 8 Can't Wait. I've heard negative feedback about it as well, about 8 Can't Wait. I've also heard about an idea referred to as ending broken window policing. And I guess I'm curious to hear from the rest of council what their thoughts are on. I have not looked at any of the ideas for defunding the police. I have not seen what those alternative approaches are, as one of our guests mentioned. And I'd be curious to see what those entail. I could imagine frameworks that shift funding from perhaps police officers to social workers or something of the like. So I just want to open up that discussion while we're on this topic.
Thank you. Since the Minneapolis incident, and then since the number of protests we've had in our own community, I have been literally deluged with comments, emails, phone calls, texts. I've responded to each and every one of them where I've been able to locate a phone number or an email. And a number of those, Carolyn, and I'll start this conversation with the 8 Can't Wait scenario. In my best answer to those who brought that to my attention, I said I thought that of the 8 comments or the 8 components of the 8 Can't Wait, I said I think our police department has a buy-in of almost every one. The one that I needed to do a little bit more research on is the comprehensive reporting component of that. But so that was my comment to to those who reached out to me, and I hope I wasn't too far off, and I'd be happy to answer any thoughts that you might have regarding that, Alderman Morris or Bill or Bob, if you would agree with my synopsis of where I felt we were.
I think Alderman Morris raises a good question, or a good point, which is there are others out there in other parts of the country and locally who are throwing out ideas, and I think we have to listen to everyone, and we have to test it against our experience. We have a couple forums coming up. We haven't quite figured out how we're going to do this, but the Human Relations Commission is, I want to say Human Relations Commission, is meeting on the 16th, a special meeting which we called to have a forum for people who want to speak to events that they're watching and seeing, in some cases participating in. And so that'll be one, it'll probably be a Zoom type thing like the county did, which had the possibility of, I think they're licensed to have about 200 people. So it's a lot more inclusive than here, and the library won't work, it's not open, and we can't have it probably at Hopkins Shelter House or something like that. So we're working on that, and in the next couple of days we'll have some information on it. But my point is, we've got lots of voices to listen to, lots of forums, and some formal, some not, in the days and weeks ahead. We're all going to be busy sifting and sorting, and I think we take all this in, we all make an effort to become informed as we can. We'll provide background, if need be, about what we do and why we do it. As I said, we're going to be publishing the policy. I hope people will read it. Read them. I hope we all can suspend judgment until we read and think through what all this new information is. I think that's a way to start.
Alderman Morris.
I think in addition to that, Congress was considering something that sounded like it was coming out this week. And with that in mind, we may just be subject. I haven't heard any feedback yet on whether it's expected to pass or not, but we may just be subject to those rules. But I think obviously with the, we'll have to weigh those rules as they come down too, and decide, are they enough? Are they what our community expects? Does our community want more than that? So, and I think as far as what you said, Mayor Smith, about 8 can't wait, I felt very similarly. That was a lot of what I had heard, that these are pretty common practices in general, and a lot of those things are already in place. So 8 can't wait is a nice idea, but it's really just scratching the surface, is what it sounds like.
Thank you. Alderman Verbeek.
I like the notion of policies and procedures coming forward. I think that the challenge we have is that set of expectations of what the community, and again, there's varying beliefs, varying thoughts about police and funding and whatnot, but I think if we inform people as we've planned, that's a great start. What I'd be interested in, and I've read a little bit about it, but would like to hear more about how technology can help police, how we could minimize the amount of physical contact that you all are subject to at times, and putting yourselves in peril and sometimes putting the accused in peril. What could be some of those alternatives? And again, in a time that we're struggling to find budgetary means for just about everything, anything that we could do, anything that I could do from a policy standpoint to help you all minimize those encounters where physical force is required. I'm just not sure what those tools and what those means are. So I would look forward to that kind of effort that we're talking about as a community, as to what's best to keep our community safe.
Thank you. Alderman McAdams.
I have a question from the community in regards to our hiring policy for officers with previous excessive force complaints. I'm wondering if we could speak to that.
Maybe everybody doesn't know, the city doesn't hire police officers like we hire account clerks. We have a process, we have an independent board that does that, Board of Fire and Police Commissioners, and there's background checks, there's including criminal histories and so forth. So we follow the rules that are laid out by the state government for those commissions, and we don't depart from those that I'm aware of. So the specifics, I guess we could talk offline if you like about that. I don't
Okay.
know if there's a specific case or not.
Not a specific, we were
Okay.
just talking about the
Yeah.
hiring practices.
Just generally, yeah.
Yeah, just, and
Yeah.
I didn't know the answer, so
Yeah.
I wanted to bring that forward.
Alderman Morris.
I think I'm getting the same feedback that Alderman McAdams is getting. And the question is specifically, will the police department agree to not hire officers who have previous excessive force complaints? And so I guess, I'm ignorant of whether or not we already do that.
I think that would be a red flag if, if it was documented,
Right.
verifiable. That's not something we'd miss in doing the criminal background or just the professional reference checks that we do. So I don't know if there's a specific there somewhere, but that's what the commission's independent identity is about.
I guess, in my ignorance of exactly how the police department operates in the sense of that sort of thing, I know, for example, in the military, when I would switch units, that information would follow me. But at the same time, it was very possible if I'm handing over pieces of paper, for a piece of paper to be misplaced that notes that background. So I guess I'm curious if, are there punishments that can happen within the department, within a local venue, that would never transfer to another venue if they're not formally cited or something like that?
In this case, we're talking about excessive force. That's more than just a violation of the labor contract. That's obviously something that's just the adjective excessive, that there's clearly consequences for that. So that would not be something, that wouldn't be paperwork that got lost. That would be something that certainly not in today's world. Again, we're kind of spitballing here. I'm not sure if there's a specific case, but I'd be happy to look into it if there was.
Thank you, City Manager Nicholas, and for that question, Alderman Morris. Any other comments?
One last thing that we might consider,
And then,
so
yeah.
we just looked at a report for the last year, and we're about halfway through 2020, and none of us can say what that report will look like at the end of the year, but hopefully it's a lot of positives. I'm very proud of the way the department engaged people. For the most part, they didn't know. People who wanted to do some things which police officers are traditionally trained not to allow. Not marching under a permit and orderly and so forth, but just kind of taking over street and so forth. We came to understand that some people were trying to express themselves and to control an area and feel safe in an area while they're talking. So it was a new language, it was a new way of expressing true concerns. And we listened and bent. So that will be interesting. I think, though, we ought to not wait as a community, as an organization, for things to arise when people are anxious and fearful and angry and so forth. and this is what I think we have to challenge ourselves to look at in the next weeks and months. What can we do to help, and Carolyn touched on this, inform people about what our policies and procedures mean? Years ago, there was something called the Citizens Police Academy, I think it was called, and we had people come in and go through simulators, and they would show what it was like to come up on a traffic stop and the things that you might have to deal with if you're a police officer, and that gave some insight. And we need to see the other side of that, too. I don't know that there are simulators that show what it's like when police arrive when there's a rally or a demonstration. I don't know, looking from another set of eyes. But the best thing we have is a lot of experience just in the last couple of weeks that I think we'll have more experience of in the weeks and months ahead. And I think we ought to talk about that experience. And then that may be hard to document, but I think that will be the most valuable thing in next year's account.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Alderman McAdams.
So we had talked at the beginning of the year about legalization of cannabis, and we were going to come back to that topic to see how that was being implemented, if there was something that we could do to help. What are the general experiences with the first few months of that?
I'll defer to Bob on that. As you know, we, because of COVID, frankly, we haven't had, looked like pretty urgent progress toward getting at least one dispensary here, and that hasn't happened yet, but we think it will. So Bob, any thoughts on enforcement?
No, we've had zero problems with the legalization. Our biggest problem is when somebody has it on them and we arrest them, holding on to it for them until they're released.
Okay.
So, but, I mean, there was miscommunication or nobody really understood the law and what's a sealed package, what's not a sealed package. So we're trying to do the best we can to, give the person that has the cannabis the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
But I don't think we've had any issues whatsoever.
And if you look at the stats, too, that are in the report as it relates to Part 2 crimes, all of the drug-related type offenses in terms of relationships from 2018 are down. Cannabis Control Act, methamphetamine offenses, hypodermic syringes and needles, drug paraphernalia, Controlled Substance Act, they're all down significantly. So that's good news. Okay, well, I think with that, I appreciate Chief Riddell. I appreciate you being here tonight. I know it's been a busy baptism under fire, so to speak, as our chief, and I just commend you for everything you've done.
Thank you, and I'd be amiss not to thank the community, the officers. I mean, everybody's been working together. It's been a difficult time. I mean, not only for the officers, for the protesters, for the community, but truly, since Sunday night, each night it gets a little bit better. There's a better understanding of what everybody is expecting as far as what a protest is, and we're learning as we go.
Thank you. There is no executive session scheduled at this time. There will be an executive session scheduled after our regular city council meeting. I'd ask a motion from one of the council members to adjourn this meeting of the Committee of the Whole.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Favor, seconded by Alderman Verbeek, that we adjourn this meeting of the Committee of the Whole. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? We are adjourned. City Council regular meeting starts at 6 p.m.